Art tips. Hearing these has saved me a lot of time, and since you can never stop learning and improving in art, I find them really helpful. So in today's video, I would like to share 10 of my favorites. Hi, here's May. And alongside the 10 tips, I show you an illustration process of 2 of my favorite Genshin Impact characters. Without much more talking, let's get started with the first one. This would be using guidelines, whether it's for figuring out the perspective of a scene or the proportions or pose of a character. Having underlying guidelines helps to prevent mistakes later on. Fixing these guidelines goes by pretty fast, whereas fixing a full illustration, including lines and colors, can be very time consuming. If you start with guidelines, you're also able to solely focus on these before you think about the line art, the facial features of a character, the hair, the outfit, the colors, and so on. It's important to have a good base to start out with, so in the beginning I would focus on getting the guidelines you want to use to work. For this, it's important to know things such as form and perspective and what guidelines you want to use in general. The next tip is related to this, and this would be blocking in elements in your illustration as well as colors or values. Similarly to the guidelines, doing this before you start working on the shading and painting in elements helps you to see if the composition, colors, and lighting within your illustration work. I would recommend doing this either early on or before you, for example, add in the colors or paint in the lighting. For me, this is an easy way to try out some different things as well. I would simply use one layer to draw in some elements and try out various arrangements by transforming them. For blocking in the colors, I would paint them in on one layer or have a color palette at the side where all the colors I would like to include are drawn in. And for blocking in values, I would make the illustration black and white by adding a layer filled with gray set to the saturation blend mode, and then on another layer paint in black, gray, and white tones. You could also combine this value blocking with the color blocking by then adding a layer set to the color blend mode on top and painting in some colors. For all of these blockings, what would be good to remember is to use simple shapes and not focus on details. To do this, zooming out and using big brush strokes helps a lot. A small bonus tip here, I would also add the principle big to small. You can apply this for any part of the illustration. Start with the bigger parts, then work your way towards the details. Like this, you can make sure you're first getting the base down before getting lost in the details, and you can avoid spending too much time on those details as well. But more on that in a later tip for this video. Now let's get to the next tip. And this is about using references. Firstly, references are super useful, so just using them already is a helpful tip, but here I would like to talk more about how you can use them. Especially at the beginning, I would sometimes get lost in references and end up spending a lot of time looking up things. Sometimes this would then take me out of my drawing process and flow. What I recommend for this is, before you start to draw, get all the references you think you'll need, but keep this limited to a few, around 1 to 5 for each aspect you would like to include. Aspects here could be the pose, the character you're drawing, the outfit, the colors, the background, and so on. While you're drawing, you can then only use those references, and only if you discover you're struggling with a particular thing you can add references for this as well. To gather all the references in one place, I use Pure Ref. There you can create mood boards and use them for each of your illustrations on a second window. If you only have one screen, most drawing softwares include a feature where you can keep your reference images. You could also use your phone and create folders in your gallery for each illustration if you're not already using this as your drawing medium. And for searching the references, I would recommend using Pinterest. You can also organize them into boards, and like this you maybe won't have to look a few things up for your future illustrations and can instead reuse your older boards. Over time, I have created hand pose, body pose, outfit reference boards, and so on. And whenever I start a new project, I try to see if I can use these first before I look up new things, because when you're looking up new things, this can lead to getting distracted by all the new pins Pinterest recommends to you, and I've experienced losing time because of this many times before. To save some time with gathering references, you could also set aside some time to just focus on creating nice boards or looking up other people's boards you can use as reference for future projects, and like this you could again prevent having to look up too many new things in the future. As for using the references, I mentioned how it's good to have some for different aspects in your illustration and being more specific with them. And this separation of your illustration and art in general into different elements would be what I talk about for the next tip, which would be being able to look at art and elements separately. Like this, figuring out what isn't working and why something isn't working is much easier than looking at the artwork as a whole and trying to figure this out. Overall, observation would be the key element here, especially recognizing differences between your art and the art you like or your references. This separation of art into different elements such as composition, perspective, anatomy, colors, or lighting can also be very helpful if you want to study art, focusing on one element at a time by making yourself maybe a playlist of videos if you use YouTube for studying, and then you can apply what you see in the video, drawing along with them to really absorb what you're learning. For me personally, taking notes and being able to remember what I wrote down for them helps a lot as well, and to not overwhelm yourself here, focusing on one element at a time helps a lot. For tip 5, we have being time effective. I already mentioned this a bit for tip 2 with the big to small aspect, and here I would mean spending more time on the areas in focus while keeping the rest more simplified. If you want to add details, it's good to do this mainly for the areas in focus. To implement this for character illustrations, you can first make sure that the face of the character, or if the focal point is the hand as well look good, and afterwards work on the rest of the illustration. Here it's not necessary that it looks as nice. I myself also tend to have the most concentration when I start to draw. By the end of each drawing session, I can lose a bit of focus. Due to this, I find starting with drawing the heads for characters, then the bodies, and finally the outfits the most pleasing for me drawing process-wise. If you're interested in drawing more effectively, I would also recommend watching this video after the current one where I share more information about using the time when you're drawing wisely. The next tip I would like to mention would be having a goal. This can help with, for one, being more motivated while you draw, as well as being more intentional. Whenever you're drawing something, you likely have the goal of realizing an idea. It's good to define this more clearly and like this to get a better idea of steps to take to get there. On top of realizing the idea, you could then add practicing or experimenting more with a particular element in the illustration. Like this, your goal could look something like this. I would like to draw Diluc from Genshin Impact performing a fire attack with a fire phoenix in the background. The illustration should convey energy through the perspective and pose, as well as Diluc's reserved personality through his facial expression. A particular element I would like to focus on in the illustration would be the fire, how I would like to draw this, as well as what interesting lighting setup this could create. Like this, you can already have a better idea of what you would like to include and spend your time on during the drawing process. In some cases, you may also start with an image in your head where the pose and composition of elements in the image and maybe even the colors or lighting is already determined. Refining this and realizing this would then be the main goal. Using references for creating a goal can be helpful as well. Like this, your goal could then be to use the flowers from one image and combine this with the forest from another image for the background. Then you might have a pose from another reference and a lighting and color setup from another. In this case, the goal could sound something like, I want to draw this character with the pose from this one reference, or even combining multiple references for the pose, and then I would like to achieve a similar lighting setup in my illustration as from this one or these multiple references. And the same goes for the colors. I would like to be inspired by and learn from these references or this one reference here. As tip number 7 I have, don't overwhelm yourself with many different art styles and elements. This relates to what I mentioned for tip 4. There are many amazing art styles and art fundamentals, elements within the art to study out there. Especially at the start, getting exposed to all of this helps you with finding out what direction you like most when it comes to art. After a bit of exposure to many artists or learning about all kinds of fundamentals on a basic level, I would then focus on one direction or one artist. If you study one artist, it's best to take your time, and like I mentioned before, you can use the different elements to help you with learning from the artist. Instead of telling yourself, I want to draw characters like this artist, you can say, I want to draw hair like this artist. Like this, you can start with learning that one aspect. As a next tip, I have learning about the fundamentals first and then learning to stylize them. While it's important to first have fun when drawing and just draw what you want, if you really want to focus on improving, I would recommend learning the fundamentals and trying to draw realistic humans. For example, no matter what kind of characters you'd like to draw, even if they're stylized, you can take a lot of rules you learn from the fundamentals and then apply them in different forms later on. For example, for color palettes, fundamental-wise, you would learn about color contrasts, what they are and how they can be used, and then you could apply these color contrasts for your own character designs or illustrations. Next, for tip number 9, I have taking time with illustrations and drawing over multiple days. This helps me to get a new view of my illustration, and I find breaking down my process into steps and not doing everything in one sitting keeps me focused as I work on each step of the illustration. I'll include a basic chart of how I implement this in my own drawing process here. I talked more about this in my step-by-step tutorial, so if you're interested in hearing more about my whole drawing process, you can check that out as well. Tip number 10 would be having time to intuitively draw and time to just observe while drawing. This is correlated to the previous one. I personally like to fix my sketches and line art in the morning while doing the line art and shading in the evening. Like this, I cannot get distracted from drawing as I draw and intentionally take my time to just look at the illustration for fixing it. At times I will also export my illustrations and have them on my phone or on a laptop when I'm not at home. And like this I can use the time where I'm not able to draw, for example when I'm in the bus or in the car, to look at my illustrations and critique them. As a small bonus tip, I would also mention the way you use mirroring here. As I draw, I often mirror the canvas to be able to make strokes more easily so that it's more convenient for my drawing hand. When I then critique and fix my illustration, I would look at it regularly for a longer time first, then I would mirror it once and look at the illustration for a longer time again. The next tip will actually be a bonus one since this is more about my drawing setup. It would be having a second monitor. My general setup is this, a drawing tablet and 2 PC monitors. Like this, it's possible for me to also look at many references as I'm drawing. Especially having a smaller overview window of what I'm currently drawing on there as well is useful to me here. I understand if you're not able to apply this, and this is just my own experience, but in case you have the option to use more than one screen to draw for your references, I would recommend this. I also have to move my head from time to time due to this, which is a bit healthier for your posture. Speaking of which, I also have a standing desk, which I can really recommend. I never have any back pain, which may also be due to me working out regularly, so you can also take this as a small bonus tip to pay attention to your health. Eating healthy, sleeping enough, and making sure you regularly are moving helps you a lot with mental clarity, and like this, it leads to you being able to draw more quickly and with better quality. So take this as a final word of advice. I hope my tips were helpful to you. Check out my Patreon if you're interested to see some of my drawing processes and full images of my artwork. Thank you for watching, have a nice day and bye!